Thursday evening, it's about 7 o'clock, so it's time for us to talk about things relating to working with children, young people, families in our church. So it's good to see you all again. Recognise that we've had some glitches the last few weeks, trying working off my phone internet instead of the home internet, see if that works better. If that doesn't fix problems, we'll try a different laptop, we'll try all sorts of things to try and get this working. But the joy of technology, as with the joy of young people, is plans don't always come off and you need to keep experimenting. It's like I discovered on Sunday, the general youth worker rule happened, so we were doing escape rooms. So I spent a whole heap of time planning, and the more time you spend planning, the less young people you have along to an event. So there you go. Truisms happen. But great to have you here. And as always, I have my friend along with me. Oh, I'm here. Hey, Grover. And of course, missed you today. Oh, I didn't get to be part of the video. No, so if you watch Southside Uniting Time for Kids tomorrow, you'll discover Grover's not in it, but someone else is. Oh. But you know what? What, Richard? I kept calling him Grover. Oh, you love me? I do, Grover. Grover's here to help, and he reads out any comments you might make. Yes, I write lots of comments so I can read. I've been practicing. So if you put a comment in the comment box, we'll read it. If you've got any questions, please ask. So before we get too far, yeah, you almost forgot. I didn't forget, Grover. We want to acknowledge the first peoples of this land and whatever lands you happen to be. For Southside Uniting, it is the Yagara and the Turrbal people. But we recognise first peoples across this country, across this world. We pray for reconciliation between all peoples and between all peoples and God. So, can I go on? You can go on now. Bye. So I thought we'd spend some time today talking about what we're doing with young people as we roll out these experimental services over the next 3 months. So it was decided as we thought about how do we come back after COVID and look at that. This was a chance for us to try new things and to do new things. And so we decided, well, let's try an experiment. Try some blended services, try some contemporary services. And if you've been watching these broadcasts, if you've been connecting in with some of the stuff we've been talking about young people, children, for the last few years, you'll realise that we're wanting to start to change that culture. So for too long, we've seen churches as sort of siloed. So imagine a silo that we're in our different groups. So we've had the church body with the adults, we've had the youth group for the teenagers, we've had KFG Sunday school for the kids, and we've sort of kept them in those silos. And we want to break those down because we recognise those aren't actually helpful things. Now, for some of you, you might be struggling with, oh, well, where is Sunday school at the moment? Because that was important for you growing up. And I'll own it. Sunday school played an important part for my early faith development. But we recognise that Sunday school hasn't always done what we hoped it would do. And if you hear the huge number of people that used to be in Sunday schools and then look around for where they are in church, they're not there anymore, which suggests something went wrong. And so we're trying to work out, well, how do we fix that? And this isn't just a hairball scheme from Southside Uniting or Richard. This is children workers, youth workers across the world are saying, hang on, we've got this wrong, this needs to change. And so we want to move to an intergenerational type model. An intergenerational where we are trying to learn and worship and serve together. So those of you who've been tuning in regularly will know that a couple of months ago now, I attended the Intergenerate conference. And in the first session when they were talking about different definitions of what does intergenerational mean, they quoted someone who said, we keep sending the children out of the church service. And then we become amazed when, well, they decide to stay out. So what does it say to young people when we say to them, all right, it's time for you to go out. It's time for you to leave us and go off to Sunday school, go off to your programs. We're saying what's happening here isn't for you. You go off there. And the problem is that too often what they've done off there has been so different to what happens in the church building itself, that when it comes time that they're old enough to come and integrate into that church, it's so foreign that, well, they don't connect. And so they stay divorced. And so we want to try and stop that from happening. We want to integrate young people into the service. Now, when we talk about intergenerational, need to recognise that this is not just about how do we include the kids in Sunday morning. That, yes, that's a part of it, but an intergenerational service might have several generations. So I'll come back to it later, but today I was part of a conversation of a number of us who are working with children, young people in churches, in uniting churches across Brisbane, who went to the Intergenerate conference, and we are meeting online once a month to talk about what we're trying to do, learning from one another. And so we were talking, and I've just gone off why I was bringing that up. It'll come back. But we've been exploring and talking about what does it mean to do something different. And a number of them are saying this is our chance to just do intergenerational, to make that change in the congregation. So for some, the Gap Uniting are about to go back to face-to-face worship, and that will just be for the families. The older people have said, we're quite happy with, we're quite happy with online, so they're focusing on the families. But in that conversation, one person pointed out that intergenerational, as Christine Embry, who was one of the speakers at the Intergenerate conference, comes from America, says is intergenerational is any time there are at least one representative of at least 3 different generations. So yes, that can include young people, but that could be 3 generations of adults. If they're working together and actually learning together, because they learn differently. And as some of the speakers at Intergenerate conference pointed out, that perhaps church has been really good at preaching to the adults, sort of in their midlife type area, not so good at including young people in the services, and maybe not really good at preaching to the more aged, or the elderly, or the more senior members of the congregation. In that sense, they're in this new part of life. And are we talking about how they integrate their life, or are all our examples about what do you do in your workplace? Happy for people to challenge that idea. But so this intergenerational is how we're getting the generations to work and worship and serve together. And again, it's not just Sunday morning, but it'll be about when we're doing service projects. How is that intergenerational? How are we seeing the generations working together? How are we seeing the generations form and mould those events? When we have prayer retreats, how is that intergenerational? When we have working bees, how is that intergenerational? So on and so forth. We've talked about things like garage sale being, in the past, intergenerational. And as we've had conversations about that elsewhere, people said, well, we've had them all working, but have the young people had a voice in shaping that? So how do we continue to grow that and continue to do that? And so we want to recognise and aim at doing things intergenerationally. And that will be a journey for us. We're not going to get it right first week out. And if you were at a service on Sunday, we probably didn't get it right. But that's okay. It's learning. So part of it, and part of our decision making from the point when we went into online services, was trying to avoid the children's talk. Not because they were bad, but because, in a sense, when we say, okay, we're going to have a children's talk, it says to the kids, okay, this is the part we want you to pay attention to. You can pull out of everything else. Ignore the rest, just come and focus on here. And we often make the kids uncomfortable because come and sit down the front, and they're all going, I don't sit down the front with everyone looking at me. Some have a personality that love that. Others just, that's freaking them out. So we're not going to necessarily do, let's sit and have these children's talks. But things like that will be interwoven into services. So I loved a couple of weeks ago when Esteban left the service. And they had the reading was Jacob wrestling. And so they got Jack O'Brien and his mum obviously reading and organising it to tell the story and act it out. And yes, the kids would have connected with that. And that was our Bible reading. That's intergenerational. I wasn't at Tarragini on Sunday. I was over at Holland Park. But David apparently, at least in one of the services, after the sermon, used a story. And didn't say, okay, kids, come down the front, this is our kids' time. But just interwove it in. That's what intergenerational is. Where we're just interweaving it. It's not pointing out, here's the block for kids, but kids, we're interacting with you. Jock, thinking through some stuff in his sermon, was talking about examples, feeding magpies. See, I was paying attention, Jock. I heard about the magpies. And things like that the kids could relate to. And so we're going to try that. And as I said, this is experiment time. Experiment for services and experiment for how we integrate the children. So please, if you have feedback, if you hear feedback, let us know. Let me know in particular. So I know a couple of people have said, I've had people complain. I've had no one complain to me about it. I'm a big boy. I can handle it. So if you hear comments, please feed back. Yeah, good comments. Definitely feed those back. Love to hear those. But it's an experiment. Part of what we'll do is trying to equip families to interact with their children. And so we're providing bags for each child, which includes either pencils or crayons, depending on what they wish to use. There's a little pack of cards they can play with. For the first week, there's some tiny teddies for them to eat. And we're providing those. Each week there'll be the worksheet. So the kids can work on those that, okay, if it doesn't seem to be connecting with me, I've got something to keep me busy. But it's also, we're encouraging the parents to be, how are you connecting and engaging with your kids? So I sent out a sheet a few weeks ago with 10 tips of engaging your child in a service, and got into some kerfuffle because I was pushing send just as we were deciding not to meet for the next 2 weeks, and then got people going, we shouldn't be meeting. It's like, I just got in too early. I was organised for once. But it encourages parents things like, the first one was, be excited about going to church. So what does it say to our kids if we go, okay, kids, off to church, let's go? It's not really sending a great message to them. But if we're saying, hey, church time, let's go, isn't it great we get to meet with people, then maybe they'll connect more and be excited about going. Talks about talking with them about what happened in church on the way home. What happened? What did you see? It talks about be intentional whisperers. So we're giving parents the permission to whisper to your child, hey, do you understand what's happening? Do you get what's going on? Used to always watch Kylie as I was leading communion in the Upper Hunter, back when I was allowed to do such things. Imagine letting me loose with that. But she would sit down with Honor and go, why are we having the bread? Why are we having the juice? Why do we do this? How do we do that and help children to connect, help children to understand what's going on. Been trying to have the conversation a few times during this COVID of, well, Oliver, why do we sing in church? Because he'll just sit there and do something else. Well, why do we sing? It's about talking to God and telling God how great we think He is, isn't it? Well, wouldn't you like to do that? Which maybe means we need to think about, why do we do things in church? And that's a good process for us to ask, why are we doing these things? Why are they important for us? And then we can communicate with the kids. But we need to remember, we need to let our kids know why we do these things. They're just second nature to us, but kids may not necessarily know. It's like a couple of years ago, Tarragindi introduced the idea that as we gave our offering and as we prayed for the offering, everyone stood. And someone pointed out that obviously they'd missed the first week when that happened, because they just turned up and everyone did it, and they had no real idea why we were doing it. And so when I led a service, we'll all stand as a symbol that we're dedicating ourselves as well as our gifts. That sometimes we just need to spell it out for the adults, and we need to spell it out for the kids. We can't just assume, well, they know what we're doing. And I'm shocking like that. I'm good at, well, I know what's going on. What do I need to tell other people? So I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you. But yeah, how do we intentionally whisper to our kids? And being intergenerational. We were having a conversation with someone, I think it was today. And what would it look like if our older members of our congregation were being those mentors in the service, or chatting, being intentional whispers to the young people? Hey, are you understanding that? Are you getting it? Now, that would be great. Made the comment, we had a debrief meeting this morning about the services on Sunday, and I said it was really wonderful at Holland Park that Elizabeth Dunbar felt confident enough to stand up and talk about the fact she was going on camp for the next few days, and people responded really positive and asking, where are you going, and isn't that great? There's obviously a desire in our church to have those connections. How do we just build them? How do we work on them? Because as we work on those and build those connections of generations talking to one another, then we will see our young people embed themselves more in our church. And it also means, like, as I said, we need to explain to our young people what we're doing in church, which might mean we need to think through what we're doing. It means we need to think through our faith. Why do we do that? Why do I believe this? Why do we do communion that way, not this way? All sorts of things. I was always talked about back in Belmont and Newcastle. What if we did a service and just did it all backwards? So start with the benediction and work through. And then you're forced to think, well, why do we do that after that? Why does that happen before that? And, I know why things happen in an order in church. Do other people? So we do adoration, because we want to glorify God. We start with, the focus is on God. And then we do confession, because we recognize we've messed up and we need to get right with God. And then we're ready to come and look at the Word. We have our Bible ready. And then we hear a sermon. And then we respond to the sermon. We respond by giving our offerings. We respond by hearing what's going to happen in the weeks to come and how we can live out what we've learnt in the sermon through activities. And then we go out and we bless one another. So there's a flow to a normal Uniting Church service. But I had to be taught that, to know that that was there. Do we know it? Do our young people know it? How are we helping them to understand? This is part of our challenge. So we're encouraging parents to be alongside kids. We would love all our church people to feel, hey, if a kid's around, I can whisper to them and I can engage them in the service and help them to engage in the service. Not in a, shh, would you be quiet sort of way, but let me help you understand what's happening here. So that's some of the thinking about what we're doing intergenerationally. Some of the reasoning why we're not doing Sunday school, KFG, those sort of things. Partly it's yes, we don't want the silo type stuff. I also recognise that with COVID restrictions, it would become easy and potential, and may not happen, but in some minds, people going, well, hang on, we can only have 50 people in this room. May we have those days when we have too many people book and we have to say, no, you can't come in. Not that we want to tell people to go away, but that might be a problem. That would be awesome. But I can imagine, okay, we've got a room, 50, 4 people couldn't come in, and suddenly 6 kids go out to KFG or to Sunday school. Well, that's 6 adults that could have been in this room. And so do we then say, well, the kids just immediately go off because they can be in another room, and then they could have 50 in that room, and we can have 50 in this auditorium. And so we could have 50 adults turn up right from the start, and the kids are just always off there. It becomes too easy for us to segregate the kids. We don't want to do that. We don't want to keep sending the message that you're off there. Although, there's some thinking now that I want to do. Part of the conversation we were having today, the children's youth workers who went to Intergenerate. Yes, right name. The people at Emmanuel are they're doing Sunday school. But instead of the traditional Sunday school, they're taking the material that they're sending home for families to use, and they're working through that. And their hope is to encourage a number of the parents to lead that so that they get used to, if I can lead it here on Sunday, I can lead it at home with my family. And then their hope is some of their older kids start to lead those sessions. And well, if I lead it here on Sunday, I can lead it at home. And so rather than here we're outsourcing the faith formation to the church again, they're training up their church people to be able to do the faith formation at home. So again, that's part of why we're trying to avoid necessarily the children go out, because it's caught us into this trap of, okay, as parents, we can sit back because the Sunday school teachers will do the faith formation with our kids, and we're let off the hook. Research continually shows that the biggest formers of faith in young people are their parents. And the best faith formation happens when it's within the family. So we want to resource and we want to strengthen that, and we want to emphasize that. We don't want to return to, well, we send the kids off and they do the faith formation off there. So that's, again, part of our thinking. Now, having said all that, intergenerational does recognize that there are times for and necessity for faith formation at age appropriate and within age groups. So it's not we do everything intergenerational and there will be no age specific groups anymore. That's not the case. That's not where we're aiming for. That would not be helpful. And so we will continue to find ways that we can have age appropriate things. And so at the moment, that age appropriate thing is the midweek video that goes out, where hopefully we are interacting in a way that is connecting with our young people. I think it's getting a bit stale and I need to refresh it a bit again and get a bit more energy. But the last week or so, the brain space hasn't been there to think through. So if people have got comments and ideas of how we can reinvigorate that, please tell me. Yes, one of the things I will admit, I'm not highly creative. Like these people that think outside the box and come up with these weird, wacky ideas, that's not naturally my way. So I tend to get stuck in a rut and this is great, I'm in my rut and I'm happy. So if you've got wacky, strange ideas of me to try, tell me. It's been great having Russell doing my videoing because he comes up with ideas and some of them we make happen really good. So, you know, last week getting ready to film, and he's like, "Oh, you could have Grover call you that he's sick." And I'm like, and I thought, well, we were going to go out to meet Grover at the river, so maybe we could have Grover call us from the river, and then we could go. And suddenly we had this more action-packed, exciting thing, as opposed to me going, "Oh well, we're going to go down the river and find Grover." So I need those people to be giving ideas. But yeah, so we're going to continue to input stuff and bring out video type stuff midweek as a way of doing intentional education with our kids at an age appropriate level. That's for the moment. As we move ahead, that might change. I know one of the churches I worked with in the Upper Hunter in my last few months, they were just recognizing they had a bunch of kids who were old enough to have some sort of faith formation at church. I tried to encourage them, well, you've got messy church, isn't that wonderful? Why don't you put your emphasis on that? But they wanted a Sunday school. But at least they were doing, we're going to have Sunday school, and then we'll all go into the main service. Personally, I go, what would it look like if we had Sunday school for a whole bunch of age groups, which is not a whole bunch of age groups for children, but across the board, where we had stuff that was age specific for children, stuff that was age specific for teenagers, things that were age specific for young adults, things that were age specific for middle ages, age specific for the elderly. However we want to break that up. And to do that in a way that people feel free to, well, I'm a young person, but I connect more into the teenage stuff, or I connect more into the adult stuff, and having that opportunity to mold. I think that's an opportunity for us to explore, because we all need to be building, as we talked about last week with Bonhoeffer, we all need to be growing our faith. And so how are we giving those opportunities for our children, but also for our adults to be growing our faith? So throwing it out there. There we go. If anyone important is watching, there's my idea. And we have mooted that around, at least with a couple of people. But yeah, what would that look like if we're all doing Sunday school together, but in different age groups, different levels? How would that be seeing our faith grow? And then how might our worship services change so they become more focused on worship as opposed to this is our only teaching opportunity? But that's another soapbox that I probably should not get onto. So hopefully that explains why we're doing what we're doing with young people and what we're doing. As I say, this is an experiment. It's an experiment of services. It's an experiment of what does it look like to be intergenerational. And the church as a whole across the world is still experimenting with what does that mean and what does that look like. And in different places, it looks like different things. So you're going to have to be gentle with us as we experiment, as we explore and try new things. But we want to deliberately intergenerational worship, where we're all worshipping together across the generations, engaging each other, supporting each other, learning together. That is our hope. And again, feedback how we're going, because we need to know when we hit it and when we don't. Grover's had a very easy night tonight. I think he's fallen asleep. Shh. You can wake him if you want. Feel free to comment if you've got anything you'd like to look at us to look at in the next few weeks. So, love some ideas of what you guys would like to hear about. We might do some stories of what's been happening in the various groups, unless you come up with something else that you'd like to hear about. So, we'll see. But let me pray, and then you can get on with your evenings, and I can go and have some choc fudge brownie. Let's pray. Loving God, we thank you that you call us to be church. And we recognize you call us to be your church at this strange time in the world, and this time when you are doing something new, and that maybe we needed something like COVID to pull us out of the old and to go to where you want us to go. And so guide us and lead us. Help us to know where you are going. Help us to know who you want us to be as your church. Help us to be brave. Help us to listen to people's voices. To hear where we've done well, to hear where we need to fix. Help us to move forward. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So again, thank you for those who are watching. Thanks for those who will watch in the week to come. Again, if you've got questions, pop them in the thing. If you've got feedback, email me, call me. Love to talk more about what we're doing and why we're doing. We're just doing what we think God is leading us in the church across the world to do, knowing that sometimes we'll get it wrong, but we'll try our best. I'm going to be quiet. Have a good week. If I don't see you Sunday, if I don't see you before or after, we'll see you next Tuesday, hopefully. Have a great one.